How to add activities. There are several variants to add the activities into PhET. All of them have different advantages and disadvantages. Since this is a basic needed skill, I will explain it more detailed in different videos. Let's start by adding simply activities using the Add Activities interface. In normal cases you only need to select the correct teacher, students and subject. Select the correct number of split and the durations and add the activity. You can also add several students or teachers into the same activity. Just select several of them at the same time. Of course you can remove them again from the activity by double-clicking on them. Alternatively you can clear the whole list. Let's have a look on how an activity will be placed if it isn't split and the duration is 1. Of course there will be only one time slot used, at a random day and hour. So the result might look like one of the examples. How will an activity look like if it isn't split but with an duration of 2? There will be 2 consecutive slots used at a random day. So it might look like the 2 examples on the left. But it will never look like the 2 examples on the right. This example will never occur, because the used slots are not consecutive. This example will never occur, because the duration will never split on different days. Let's check a third example. How will it look like if we split the duration into 2 parts? Both with duration 1, the consecutive flag, and 1 min days constraint with 95% weight. The 2 examples on the left are preferred. Both sub-activities are placed at different days. By the way, the second example doesn't conflict with the min 1 days constraint, because min 1 days doesn't mean there must be 1 free day between that activities. It means moving from Tuesday to Wednesday needs 1 day. PhET tries to avoid the yellow crossed example because both sub-activities are placed at the same day. The right example will never occur, because the activities are not consecutive at the same day. So the consecutive flag is always respected with 100% weight. The 95% weight affects only the min days constraint. What will happen if the consecutive flag is unchecked? Of course the left 2 examples are still preferred. PhET still tries to avoid the 2 activities at the same day, but this time it might happen that both activities are not consecutive on the same day. Maybe you have got activities that are allowed to be placed at the same day, they just should be consecutive at the same day, but PhET doesn't need to spend computing power into avoiding such consecutive activities. In that case just reduce the weight down to 0% and keep the consecutive flag checked. What will happen if the weight will be increased up to 100%? Of course the 2 examples on the left are still possible. But the 2 examples on the right will never occur, because both conflict with the min days constraint. In fact, in this example it doesn't matter if the consecutive flag is checked or not, since the activities will never be placed on the same day. Let's check what happens if the first activity has duration 2 while the second still stays at duration 1 including 1 min days constraint with 100% weight. Of course it isn't allowed that both activities will be placed at the same day because of the 100% weight. But the maybe surprising fact is that the activity with duration 2 must not be before the activity with duration 1. Both activities can be swapped. In normal case this is a perfect solution for all schools. Some guys might think that they have got an example where it is needed to care about the order of the activities. But please think twice. Even if you have got a nice reason why it should care about the order, I can already tell you that in real life even a timetable with such an order will in fact be never in that order. Why? Because what do you think will happen with that order if one of that days is a public holiday? What will happen if the teacher is ill? What will happen if students are on a school trip? As you can see, it normally never makes sense to care about such an order, since in real life such an order will be unordered pretty fast. If you think that nevertheless you need to care about such an order, please add an order constraint. Now let's stay at the same example, just with only 95% weight and consecutive flag. Of course PhET still prefer to place both activities at different days. But PhET might allow to place them on the same day if the activities are consecutive. Please don't forget that PhET spends much time to avoid this yellow crossed example. If this example is fine for your school, please reduce the weight down to 0% or just add 2 separated activities instead of a single one. With this example, not consecutive activities at the same day are still not allowed and will never occur in the final table. If those activities are fine for your school, then you only need to uncheck the consecutive flag. Of course all other stuff will stay like just described. Let's check activities that are split into 3 parts. The first example with one min-day constraint with 95% and the consecutive flag. PhET tries to avoid the yellow striked example because there are 2 consecutive activities at the same time. The first red crossed example is not allowed at all since the activities are not consecutive. The last example looks strange, since you might think it doesn't conflict with a 95% min-day constraint and it also doesn't conflict with the consecutive flag. You can assume it isn't allowed because the first activity isn't consecutive to the third activity. Another variant is that you can remember, there might be max 2 activities consecutive at the same day. In normal case this is the required rule for most schools. If the consecutive flag will be unchecked, then the 2 examples on the right are not disallowed anymore, but PhET still spends power to avoid those situations. If the weight will be increased up to 100%, the 3 examples on the right are not allowed at all anymore, because there are at least 2 activities on the same day. Let's check the last example for this video, again an activity that is split into 3 parts, unchecked consecutive flag but a min 2 days constraint with 95%. Of course all 3 activities on different days and always at least 2 days between them is fine. PhET tries to avoid the second example because there is only 1 day between Monday and Tuesday. PhET tries to avoid the third example because there are 2 activities at the same day. Happy timetabling!